Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of CSP, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we have three extremely talented individuals joining us, all three of whom are the experts in the field of debating, muns, and public speaking. So, without any further ado, please welcome the second timer on the CSP podcast, Mr. Rahul Rajkova, making their debuts on the CSP podcast, David Anupraj and Madhav Pravitran. Got the last name mixed up in my head. Sorry, guys. But yes, it's a pleasure having you guys on today. And yeah, if you guys could give a tiny intro to yourselves, that would be amazing.
Sure. So I'll go first. Hey guys, I'm David, and I just finished my second PU at Christ Junior College, and now I'm planning on doing engineering. And talking about my MUN career, I started MUN when I was in sixth grade. Yes, and when my geography teacher pushed me into the MUN circuit. I was pretty new in the circle, but then slowly attending MUN conferences, that's when I got a catch of it. So I've been still I've been in pretty good conferences, and right now I'm entering the university level conferences. That's it from my end.
Right.
Okay, I think I'll go next. So my name is Madhav. I graduated 12th grade recently and waiting on going to Purdue University in August. Then if I want to talk about MUN for me, I started MUN public speaking probably in 8th grade. I don't know who pushed me into it. All I remember is a couple of seniors telling me that you have nothing to do, you better go for it. So I was pushed into a delegation then. I remember I was the only 8th grader for my first conference. So that was the thing. And everyone else was like 11th and 12th. So it was kind of intimidating, but then yeah, I got a bug for it, I guess, and then haven't stopped since.
How did you you know, how did you do in that conference, and how did you tackle that intimidation that you felt?
In the first conference?
Yeah.
Okay. The first conference I ever attended was Jane MUN.
Okay.
And at that point, Jane MUN was a really, really big conference. And I remember a lot of experienced people used to come. In my committee, I don't remember the exact committee I was in, but I remember there was one guy who had like 100 MUN's experience. And he was like some huge big timer. And he was, I think, in his second year, maybe first year of college, if I'm not wrong. But he came in and he was very vocal presence. So that was like one of the big intimidating factors. So I was like, okay, in my young mind at that time, oh wait, I remember the conference. This is WTO, World Trade Organization. And as an 8th grader, I have no idea about what trade or economics or like kind of exchange rates and everything is. So anyways, it's intimidating. And on top of that, you have like 100 MUN guy. And then I was like, okay, how do I reach that level? And that was like kind of my pursuit. I ended up finishing like I think third or fourth, and the one like a validation, which was like the people who were like much older than me, they said like which year PU are you in, and I said no, I'm in 8th grade, and that entire like that kind of thing, which is like oh you seem or you act like much older than you are, or you seem more knowledgeable than you are. That was kind of like a fever dream for me at least. It was like oh I can be as knowledgeable as maybe 11th grade or something like that. So then that kind of thing again, it just pushed me into like go for more MUNs and things like that. Just facing that kind of high.
Yeah. It's always nice to hear that, you know as much as someone older than you. So yeah. And also, what about you? How did you get into all this?
So I had a phenomenal history teacher in the 7th grade, you know, and he once gave us a group assignment where the other teachers, they were giving you assignments like do a project or, make a chart paper on this leader or write an essay. But this history teacher, he gave all of us one leader. He assigned us a leader from the Indian freedom movement. And he told after the summer break, I want you all to come and debate it out. Who had the best run as a freedom fighter? And you have to prove to the class that because of this person, India achieved its freedom. So this was what, man, 2007, 8, So people weren't giving projects like this back in the day. So that's how the excitement for debating started, because we were assigned Subhash Chandra Bose and we were like, how do we debate with somebody who has Gandhi, and prove that Subhash Chandra Bose was the more important leader when it came to freedom fighting. At that point of time, we didn't realize, but we were slowly getting into, the field of debating. I first went for my MUN 2009 at the Cathedral Model UN. That was the first MUN that I'd gone for. At that point of time, MUN was still starting, it was still at its infancy. There weren't too many schools around who were doing it. Like Dhirubhai Ambani was doing an MUN. Most schools weren't doing it, So that was my first experience. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, I was the youngest kid. I was like, 13 years old that time. Great fun. I got to represent my school. Coming all the way from Assam, it was a completely different culture. What stood out to me was we were sitting in the auditorium and all of these kids had these BlackBerry phones. You could surf the internet on the BlackBerry. And I was like, oh my God, what is this phone, man? These kids have internet on their hands. Because, back in the day, to have internet in your hand was phenomenal. Like no one could actually suddenly access Google on their phones. Like leave aside seeing that. I had seen a BlackBerry on TV or on an advertisement, and suddenly these kids were carrying it. And I remember the person on stage announced that this year we have Assam Valley coming in from Assam, and everybody was clapping for us, and a bunch of kids with BlackBerries and suits in front of us. They were like, Assam, where is that? Where is Assam? And then they were all Googling Assam on their BlackBerries. And I was like, wow, man, all of these kids are here. They are delegates from different countries, representing different countries. They're talking about policies in, there was OPEC nations, there was Security Council, and they knew everything about the foreign policies of these nations, but they didn't know about a state in their own country. So it really motivated me to do better, leave a mark. Our team did really well. We were a small contingent. I remember getting most promising delegate. I think I was representing Iran in the OPEC committee. But after that, because there weren't so many MUNs happening, and because we were coming all the way from Assam, right? It was a long journey for us to travel for inter-school competitions. We didn't get to go for as many MUNs. We came back to our school and we hosted our own MUN. But yeah, inter-school debates, properly, I started from class 9. I went for a bunch of them around the country, like Shri Ram School, Vasant Valley, Doon School, RIMC, Velhams, Bishop Cotton, Shimla. So yeah, the debating circuit is where I really, really found my love for public speaking. I would have loved to go for more MUNs, but there was just so much you could do, man, back in the day. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's amazing to hear. And yeah, I think the most common question every single budding manor or debater has is how to combat that fear of stage fright or making a mistake during your speech. Or yeah, so how do you guys overcome that while you're giving a speech, regardless of whether it's a man or a debate?
Yeah, so basically I'll start off because I personally had that problem of stuttering or stumbling over words or not getting the confidence to speak out in public. So I used to be that silent kid always sitting in a classroom. So that's when my geography teacher thought, so let's put him in this. So when I was pushed into the crowd, right, that you learn swimming when you're pushed into the ocean, right? Similar way, I was pushed into the crowd. So I just read out my speeches from the position paper I made. All they wanted just to see my confidence. So I got my confidence when people really appreciated the speeches I gave. That's when someone picks up that public speaking skills. It might be a very, very not so great speech, but when someone appreciates, okay, you at least took your time out to prepare that, and I liked your confidence to give that speech. And that's when you get motivated, you get boosted to come up again and speak up. So even my first MUN conference, I told I was in 6th grade. Apparently, I wasn't like Madhav looking like a second PU kid. I was that very tiny kid, and people were like, okay, which grade are you in? 6th grade. Oh, that's great. I mean, it's really nice to see you here. My first conference was TISP. Both and BlackBerry phones, the kids had accent right there. So they got that posh accent coming up. I'm like, damn, bro, they're speaking out really good. And then when I used to read out from my paper, I used to add that active as if I'm chewing gum and get out that accent. Then people used to just look towards me. And that's where I picked up my public speaking. I thought, okay, this is really fun. Let's try it again. And then over time, this became a habit. This became a really good career too. So I thought, let's continue in this. And that's how here am I without stuttering, giving a good speech. I mean, not great. I mean, but still that confidence in me has increased definitely. So this was my journey.
I think a lot of people have issues with stuttering during their speeches. I had when I initially started out, and I went for a few public speaking classes. I think this was when I was in the seventh or eighth grade. It had to stop because of lockdown and all, but those are some good times. Like I really was able to harness, my speaking skills, and it was a nice place also to let out whatever I had kept inside me, like emotions and everything like
Yeah,
that.
that's definitely there because you're put out in the public, people be staring at you, you get that
Yeah,
anxious, right? This stage fright. But once you start attending more conferences, once you start socializing with people, and once you know that they are your own, right? So that's when the fear goes away and you start speaking out in the public.
yeah,
That's I mean, I guess everyone had it during their childhood. I mean, if I'm not the only one going out, but MUNs definitely improved my public speaking skills, no doubt. So that's been my story.
yeah. Right, mother.
Okay, like I think I also had like a similar journey, which is like basically, like I said, my seniors were like, go for this, and I said, okay, sure, because I had nothing to do that weekend. So I remember like right before I was in the bus and I had this teacher, Mr. Vijay, and I asked him, I was like, okay, what is this Bretton Woods system? Because again, as an eighth grader, you have no idea what gold exchange and everything was like that. So like I remember him sitting down, like I used to go to Greenwood High, so that used to be like a 1.5 bus, bus journey, like back from school. And he just sat down. For 30 minutes, he explained to me what this system was, and I was like, okay. And then I understood. And I think, like what Rahul sort of said, like with the BlackBerry phone, we obviously like I didn't have a phone actually because until I was 16, my parents didn't want to give me a phone, so I didn't have a smartphone, and I didn't have a laptop also in my first conference. So what I basically had was I had papers, and I remember this very clearly because I had like a folder, and in this folder there were about 50 papers of printed pages, and it was just like research. And because it's my first MUN, I have never done like research like that for an MUN since then. But for my first MUN, I don't know why, it was just pages and pages and pages of research. And I was Syria, probably the worst country to be in WTO at that point in time. But I was like, still somehow I made it. And for like again, that stuttering and that entire feeling of that, because I hadn't written down my speeches, because again, like there were just pages and pages of research. I hadn't written down any speeches because I didn't know what an MUN conference was. So I was like literally thrown into the deep end, and I had to like find my way. And it's so intimidating, especially because everyone around me is like, okay, they're in 12th grade, they're in like first year college and everything like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm an eighth grader. What do I do? And I sat in that corner for like at least like the first two sessions, and I just observed. I was like, okay, what are they doing? And like what is it, David said, I noticed they had an accent as well because there were a lot of international students coming for the JNMUN conference at that point in time. So I remember there was TISB, there were some Greenwood High delegates, there were some people from Stonehill, all of those people, and they all had an accent when they spoke. And when they spoke with that accent, like I felt an impact. So I was like, okay, I'll emulate that. So like this tiny kid in the corner, and I was like, okay, I'll emulate it. And no one in the starting actually ever noticed me. So they never said that, oh, which you college are you from? So they all thought I was a kid. But then I tried to emulate that, and I think I did a fairly decent job because suddenly people started noticing me. And that's when that question came, like, which year college are you? And that was the first thing. I was like, oh, okay. I spoke well enough that I could be recognized. But you'll still stutter. Like it's just basically confidence. And like that's what debating is at the end of the day, or public speaking. It's like I like to say it's like 70% confidence, 20% is like what is it? Your information and just listening. It's mainly like 20% is listening and 10% is your information. I wish I knew that then, but I know it now. It's like 70% confidence, 20% you listen to the other person and you talk about what they said, and you get a lot of information from that, and then 10% is your own research, and that's how you usually like kind of flourish in these conferences. And that was like my experience as well.
I think
But
that's a very helpful way of seeing things. Sort of
yeah,
putting it on a pie chart. You
yeah,
this much for this much for this much for this. so you
but
don't
it,
get
like sadly, it
lost.
takes a little amount of like stuttering or falling flat on your ass to like realize that. And everyone has their own different way, but it takes a bit of stuttering and that kind of like introverted, shy kid of you. Everyone, it comes out for everyone. And the best part, which I think is very funny, is because I think everyone felt that way. It wasn't just me, but you don't realize that at that point in time. And
Yeah.
now that I've checked MUNs, I actually see those kids in the back, like me, and I'm like, okay, what is he thinking right now? Because I know what I was thinking. And I'm like, okay, cool. We'll have to try and involve them somehow because you just have to give them that push or that edge, and then they'll flourish.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. So, what I'm sure when you got into public speaking, you were very young, as you said.
Yeah.
So how did you
So
sort of, yeah.
yeah. Madhav said something very important where he said that you have to listen to what a little bit of what the other person is saying, build up on that. So in my junior global fellowship, I was taught that you always have to listen to understand and not constantly keep focusing on your own opinion. When you're constantly thinking about what you have to say, what I want to say, and then you get so caught up in that, and you are like, how do I frame this nicely? And by the time you deliver it, you end up saying 40% of what you actually wanted to say because 30% of it got taken away by external factors, like you got nervous, something happened, like you started, and in between your thoughts are racing faster than you. So that's why, especially with MUN, debating is a whole different ball game. All right, but in MUN, you have to be able to catch on what the other person just said so that you can, counter that point. That being said, let's look at it more generally. How do we get over stuttering or getting over the fear of speaking? I would say for public speaking, debating, MUN, it is very, very important to have an opinion or something. And in order to have an opinion on something, you have to be very well read. So I would say start reading your paper, start reading your journals. Once you start feeling passionate about an issue, then the inner voice speaks. You want to speak about a particular issue, and once that comes, like if you ever watch the JNU debates, like that's the first time I saw like proper Indian people speak in Hindi, and they are so eloquent. The way they'll be throwing, like the kind of grammar they'll be using, the kind of words that they will be using, and it's coming from a very, very raw space. They feel passionate about a certain, like he's talking about how David and Madhav was saying, like a lot of these kids come with accents. All right, a lot of them probably don't even know their own states or the capitals or who the chief minister of this one particular state in the country is. Like you suddenly ask them ki bhai Jharkhand ka chief minister kaun hai, bata de, and then suddenly they'll be like thrown off guard. They can tell you who the prime minister of Syria is, but suddenly they'll be off guard. So in comparison to that, like let's not look at it as a stage setup or like an MUN conference. In real life also, if you're trying to address a setup in a conference, like some of you all will be going into the corporate sector someday. So in order to speak in front of those people, there is no research material. Like, you can't plan for a conference and go. Like, you have to be able to argue your point or what you have come up with in order to make your stand in the company. So for stuff like that, you have to be passionate about, rally your energy and your focal point around that passion, so that when you speak, that passion trickles into other topics as well. You'll always notice that. So let's say if you're looking at Indian polity also, if a particular person feels very passionate about, let's say, right to information, you will see that same level of passion will carry on when he starts talking about the education policy. The same level of passion will also come down when he's talking about international relations and politics, because he has his passion point sorted. Like he knows he feels very particularly for one strong. So the entire onus of his energy is directed that one day when I get my opinion heard, this is what I would like to talk about.
Yeah, I
So
think
that's a very good way to direct your.
yeah, I think all
Get
three
over
of you
that
have
stuff.
given us some valuable tips and tricks to combat it. And I think if I may add my own points, when you do actually have a debate, or you know that okay, this is a speech I'm going to give, like say for an MUN, there's a GSL, and that speech you have to prepare beforehand compared to like a Modcock or something. So for that, exactly what you're going to say. And I think what people, of course, this is something that I do, because I do stutter too, quite a lot, honestly. And yeah, I think to combat that, I think the moment you know that, okay, these are the exact words that I have to speak of, and you know, okay, this is the tone I want to set. This is the voice I'm going to use, because you know your GSL is basically the way you make your first impression in committee, right? So for that, I would say a good way is to have a really strong speech and to be extremely clear. And as Mother said rightly, I think 70% of a good speech is being confident. And the way you can be confident is by knowing exactly what you're going to say. And it might come down to by hearting your speech, or it might come down to making points of making sub points of the main points you're going to say, or remembering an acronym that will help you during your speech. And if you just by heart your speech and you know it at the back of your hand, you know for a fact that you're not going to stutter, because you know exactly how to enunciate each word. You know exactly at what pace you're supposed to speak, when you're supposed to slow down, how you're supposed to move. And I think that's something that I do quite a bit, whether it's presenting in front of a class, whether it's a PPT, whether it's an MUN, whether it's a debate. And yeah, and I think another thing is just to have a calm mind. I think people get caught up, as Madhav said too again, that you got to realize that everyone is in the same position as you. Everyone is going through that same anxiety. Everyone's feeling nervous, and you have to realize that if you make a mistake, move on. I think where people tend to make mistakes are when they're giving a speech and they stutter or they stop, and there's like a whole moment where they're like, "Oh, sorry," oh, and your whole flow just breaks. If you stutter, it's fine, bro. Everyone does it. Just move on. And I think that's how you get back, and you won't lose your confidence completely.
I think for
Um,
me, it
yeah,
also helps that you know that people are actually listening to you. So you know that they are, they think that your opinion and what you have to say is valuable. And so that sort of helps me see it as, okay, I have to really put my heart out there so that I can help contribute to whatever the goal of the committee is. So yeah.
See, another point
yeah,
about making mistakes is that it's only you who realized made a mistake. So what happens when you make a mistake while addressing a speech, right? Don't try to correct it. So it's when you go to correct it that you are making others aware of the mistake that you made. You made mistake, just, yeah, as you said, don't point out to the mistake by telling, oh, I'm sorry, because half of the people in the crowd wouldn't have noticed, right? So if you go on correcting the mistake, that's when you go and address to the crowd telling that you have made a mistake.
Yeah,
yeah. I
actually.
think in a committee that has a lot of people, right? Like each committee has roughly 50 to 70 people. Half of them are busy trying to figure out their own speech. Half of them aren't paying attention, of course, and few people are actually paying attention. And if you actually uh, accept or acknowledge the fact that you made a mistake, it's essentially like bleeding close to a shark. Like you're you're baiting yourself to get caught by someone else. And yeah, I think that's an amazing point that David just made. Yeah, and I think moving on, what are tips that you guys have for budding Manus? You know, whether it's in terms of their research, how they're supposed to structure their speech, their rezos, their modcocs, how, so what advice would you give someone who wants to win their first Manu, their third Manu, just win in general?
All right, so I guess we'll just break it up. I'll take up how to make a speech part. So if Madhav can take up rezos or something like that, and Rahul sir can take up about researching. So I think I'll go with making up a speech, right? So your speech basically stands on how well you're researched, right? So if you're researched well enough on the topic, you're great to form a speech. So how do you frame a speech is not something you read off from a document or a website or a web page, right? So basically the chairs or someone who's judging, they judge you not on how you're talking, right? It's on the content you're talking. So definitely the judge or the EB member definitely knows to go up to such website and read up from the website itself. What we as the judge or the EB member expect is for you guys to explain a point. So when you're framing a speech, say global warming, you pick up a paragraph from the web page. All you're supposed to do is pick up important lines and brief us about it, right? Go on explaining about it. So not not like you find a web page and you go on to the committee reading out the whole paragraph, right? That would just be boring to the committee. You are supposed to make an impact in the committee by keeping up good, yeah, framing a speech in such a way that it grabs the attention of the speaker. See, all your duty right now is to frame a speech in such a way you grab the attention of the whole committee. And that is when the next time you're talking, the delegates will listen to you. And that's when others have a note that, okay, yes, this delegate is well researched. This delegate has a chance of getting placed. So when you're framing your speeches, right, it's just the way that you take out your resource, you take out your form of information, take out the points what you want to bring it out in the committee and explain on basis of that. Not read out whole paragraphs, because definitely the judge can do it themselves, right? So this, if I was in any MUN, this is what I would do. I would get my notepad, I would open my laptop, I'd take out my research, I take out few points and elaborate on that. That's how I would go on explaining it to the committee and make my impact, and also grab the attention of other delegates in the committee. Over to you, Madhav.
Okay. So like I agree with David in that kind of aspect, which is like don't like at least I've chaired a couple of MUNs now, or try to see a couple of people like speaking, and they're always with kids, right? And you kind of see them and they start speaking. And since you're a chair, you've read a lot of the literature out there already. And like you hear some sentences and you're like, oh wait, I've heard this before. Where have I heard this? And you like instantly know, right? And usually I won't call them out on it because I'm like, okay, they're a first time or anything like that. But when it's like blatant plagiarism, I'm like, okay, I'll tell them quietly. I'll be like, okay, see, these are the points. You take the points exactly what David said and you elaborate on it, or you give your own opinion on it. And I think that's what I taught you guys as well, G, in like at least in the MUN club that we said. I said the first thing you do in any MUN is you go and you make an impact. I don't care how you make an impact. It's with your voice, it's with your tone, it's with your research, it's with your facts. But the first thing you go in the conference, you go, you stand out, and you make an impact. And that tells everyone, like, and because like at least in conferences or like in debates as well, you always have the big dog, right? It's like the guy who's done 100 MUNs, the guy who's been to debates his entire life. And if you make that impact, you tell him as well, like, I'm coming for you, right? And it's not like it's not to scare anyone. It's just to make an impact and make yourself feel good about it. Because like the moment you make that impact, you feel good. Everyone else is scared, and then you know that okay, now I can say whatever I want in committee, and then there'll still be a level of people like, okay, should I question him? It's like that kind of thing, and that's how you go. And when you do that, it helps in resos as well, because like any kind of documentation or rebuttals or anything, the moment you start speaking or the moment you start typing, people are like, oh wait, this guy made an impact, right? I'll listen to him. And that's how you have that entire crowd. Because like 80% of an MUN or any kind of debate is like people are also new or they haven't gone out that much. And they're all looking for like one kind of leader or one kind of person to emulate. For me, that person in my first conference was a 100 MUN guy. So I was like, I need to emulate him because he's amazing. And his tone of voice and his accent is amazing. So I'll emulate him. So you go and you make that impact. It doesn't matter if you're like a first timer. You can make it up as you go. But if you make that impact, people will look up to you like that. And that's how you influence the entire committee kind of thing. At least that's what I think it is. And it's like that kind of thing which is like, okay, I pushed myself out the boundary. I'm there now. And now what can I do with it? And that entire like thing process of you pushing yourself out there. And now that you're there, you can do whatever you want and it should be fine.
Yeah. No.
But you
Uh,
like, but
yeah.
a lot of people don't take that first step to push themselves out.
Yeah, so I have a similar thing. So when I went for my last month, it's been quite a while since me and Jean both have done an MUN. This was in December. So and I was put into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and I was Sri Lanka. I didn't even have a permanent seat in that, and everyone. I remember there was China, Russia, and for some reason there was the United States in that committee. Uh, and those three were really like they were up there, they had their voices were like heard the most, and there was this high hierarchy. And then I went in and I was like, what is this, to hell with this. And I started speaking up. I was like, okay, this is right, this is wrong. I started saying everything, and everyone's like, what is Sri Lanka talking about? You know, he is just some he's not even a permanent member, and he's making such a stand for himself. And I ended up doing quite well in that. I think I came third or fourth, third I think in that. And yeah, and everyone was quite surprised, to be honest, because there were names like Azerbaijan, China, Russia, the US, and then there was just Sri Lanka in the thing. Everyone was just really surprised, and yeah, so that was my experience in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Yeah, Rahul, so and from a researching point, how would you go about, whether it's for Mans or debates, how would you go about researching for them?
Yeah, I think preparing for an MUN or a debate, if you are preparing a week before you are going for the competition, for the tournament, then it's definitely the wrong way to go about it, because preparing for an MUN or a debate is a year-long process. Like throughout the year, you just have to be a well-read person. That is something that you can't negate. Like for a history exam also, you can't study 1 week before the exam and go. There is too much to write down. This is not the sciences. This is the real games. This is the social sciences. This is humanities. This is international relations. This is international politics. So for stuff like this, you have to be well read throughout the year. Make it a habit of reading, international journals. Make it a habit of reading The Guardian, watching Al Jazeera, watching BBC, like on a daily. That's the best way to research. Apart from that, the points that David and Madhav gave are solid. Like, you pull out a couple of important points from the webpage. Obviously, don't read out a paragraph, because then the director has already felt a disconnect with you. There are too many kids in MUN coming with well-prepared speeches. I'm going to speak by the book. I'm the delegate of, and then they're so prim and proper. It's annoying to the director, because the director is also I want to see something different, man. I've seen 2,000 kids like you in every session. Yes, going for the big dog always helps to make an impression. Like Madhav said, like Moksh said, you are random, right? You are Sri Lanka, and you still made a stand for yourself. It definitely had an impact. I remember when I went for my first MUN, there was this one guy who was China, I think, and he was this really big guy, this big dude, he was big, he was big in size, and it was Bombay, it was hot. All of us were wearing regular suits. This guy had a purple color, a lavender color 3-piece suit on, and he had just come back from the Harvard MUN, and he was just loud, and everybody was trying to emulate him so much. They were oh my God, every time he spoke, they got so excited. And so when lobbying happens in the MUN, everybody was on his side, right? But me and my friend, we had come from Assam, we were hame to farak nahi padta, whoever this guy is, we'll do everything opposite. So our contingent was small. When the final result was being passed, we had about 5-6 countries with us. This guy had everybody else. Because everybody else just jumped bandwagon and we managed to stand our ground, we ended up getting our awards. This guy also got the purple suit guy, because he was just he was that experienced. He had been for some 100 MUNs by the time, between class 8 to class 10, 11, he had been to some 50 MUNs. And I was my God, when do you go to school if you're constantly doing that? But there are a lot of people like that, they go in there solely for the purpose of, going for extracurriculars, and that is fantastic. But yes, in an MUN, if you really, really want to stand out, you want your research to stand out, you want your points to stand out, you have to be someone who is very committed to your cause. You are preparing year-long. That's how you usually make an impact. Damn, we've got less than a minute, guys. There's so much we had to discuss.
Yes,
but
exactly. Yeah, guys, I'm sorry. We're going to have to cut it short. Who knows? The viewers might see a part 2 sometime in the future. But yeah, it was a pleasure having you guys on. I'm going to rush. Guys, subscribe, follow us, comment, like, share. We'll tag all 3 of their accounts. Go follow Rahul sir, Madhav, and David. And yeah, guys, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure meeting you boys.
Thank you, everyone.
All the best.
And if we don't see you again, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.